Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. It has been interesting over the last 12 hours or so. Or maybe even longer than that. Where I feel like I'm reliving the post-Michigan football game. Okay, here's one for you. Penn State won the game last night. All right, and they beat another team that is on the cusp of going to the NCAA tournament. Let's give Rutgers all the credit in the world for coming back last night. Which was, look, but that's been Rutgers' pattern this year. I mentioned this on the broadcast. I mentioned it before the game. And I mentioned it before the Indiana game. I said Indiana is an unusual team in that they score more points in the first half than they do the second half. Well, Rutgers is a team that scores a lot more points in the second half than they do in the first. Why they get off to slower first half starts, I don't know. That's something Steve Pikiell would have to address. But you look at the games where they're down big to Northwestern, they storm back and win. They're down big against Wisconsin, they storm back and had a 3 to try and tie the game at the end. So you've got a lot of different teams that play that way for whatever reason. Now, for Penn State, they built the lead, and for the sixth straight game, they play without Myeron Jones. Now, I think that has to be brought into play here. I'm not saying Myeron Jones is the be-all, end-all, and he's not the savior, but he is your second leading scorer. And it's really hard to go through 6 games without a guy averaging 14 points a game who then becomes the supplemental guy. This is a guy who, at the end of the game, is the additional facilitator passing the ball. He's the guy at the end of the game that's the additional shooter out there. He's the guy at the end of the game that's the additional ball mover. He's the guy at the end of the game that's shooting free throws for you. He's been that kind of guy for them all year. The fact that they've gone 4-2 without him, there's really one other team in the Big Ten that's had to really experience this, and that's Michigan with Isaiah Livers. And Michigan's done a heck of a job. Now they got Livers back. And with Myeron Jones out, you're playing an 8-man rotation. That's a lot of wear and tear on legs. And just like Penn State ran off a 30-5 run at Indiana, because really good teams can do that, Rutgers ran off a run to get back in the game. And for some odd reason, you play 40 minutes just like 60 minutes in football. If you have more points than the other guy, you won. Okay? It's like, and college basketball, this is different, right? There has to be an escape of the football mentality here when you're talking about college basketball. You got to get rid of it, because this is not Ohio State, Wisconsin Big Ten football championship game, and Urban Meyer knows he's got to score a lot of points to get into the college football playoff. And they beat Wisconsin 59-0. And you're thinking to yourself, do I back off? Do I back off? I'm trying to get in there. Penn State's in. They're in. Okay, the bottom line is just keep winning. They're not going to sit there in the committee room and go, oh, wow, they gave up a lead, but they won by 1. They're sitting there going, okay, you're 21-7. You're now 11-6 in the Big Ten. That's what they're looking at. Right? That's what they're looking at, and you can't look at it as the style point thing. You start playing the style point thing, and you're just going to have then suddenly out of nowhere, you're really going to be at the point where you're kind of losing perspective on what is actually important in late February and into March. Okay, these are the kind of games that do get played in the NCAA tournament. Just like Penn State ran off a 30-5 at Indiana to get back into that game, Rutgers did the same thing to Penn State last night. In the end, Penn State won the game. And that, in the end, is actually all that matters here. That's all that matters. Hello, Bob.
Hey, Steve. I was going to ask you, so last night you were at home in front of the fireplace, cuddled up with a good book, nothing exciting going on at all. But I was wrong.
Look, they played brilliantly in the first half. I did not like how the final 138 went of the first half. I didn't like it. I looked over because now you start seeing something different from the first 18 and a half minutes. I'm gonna hunt my own. I'm gonna get careless with the ball. I didn't like how they finished. I thought to myself, they better clean this up before they start the first 4 minutes of the second half. They didn't do it. Now, one thing that keys any comeback, and Penn State stayed away from this in the first half, but then they hit a bad spot in the second half. You must stay away from live ball turnovers. You have to, and live ball turnovers, those LBTs, okay, they are ones. Let's take the Illinois game. Illinois, in the second half of the game, committed 4 shot clock violations. Now, you have to play great defense to get a shot clock violation. So Penn State plays great defense, and they get 4 shot clock violations. The only plus for Illinois in that situation is that each one is a dead ball turnover, which allows them to then go back, set up their defense, go from there. A live ball turnover, you can't set your defense. You're backpedaling, trying to run to spots. Everything's helter-skelter, and that's where you get hurt. And Rutgers took advantage of some live ball turnovers last night that helped get them back in it. The bottom line is, though, is that Dredd, for the second time this season, Yale being the other one, stepped up when they needed a calm hand to take the shot and took it. And Lamar Stevens, who did not have a good night, when it came time for that last possession, you name the Rutgers player and they all went at him. And instead of playing hero ball, he got it out of there to Brockington, who then got it over to Dredd, and Harris set the screen and he hit the shot. Then Penn State has to play 28 seconds of defense. In other words, almost a full shot clock. And they came out, no timeouts, knew exactly what to do. They blitzed Geo Baker, so Baker had to give the ball up, and he is, if you had to pick the clutch guy on the floor, that's him. He had to give it up to Harper. They then rotated quickly toward Harper, so Harper didn't have a play. So he then kicked it over to Yeboah, and I just talked about Lamar Stevens not having a great night. He's the guy that got it out of the post. He's also the guy that was the defender with the hand in the face of Yeboah. And then to cap it off, remember it's a one-point game, Hara boxes out Johnson and gets the rebound to close it. I mean, you can't play defense better in the final 28 seconds than Penn State did when they had to there.
I don't think Lamar hit double figures in points, did he?
No, he had 9 last night. It's the first time in almost 50 games he hasn't done.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, that was in itself a record, not the kind you want to have.
But you know what? But they won.
Yeah.
See, in other words, for Lamar, they won. Now, was it a humbling experience? Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah, I would say. But I thought, listening to you and Dick coming out of the second half, that I think there was I don't want to say disappointment, but concern in your voices as you were talking about that first 4 minutes of the second half.
Because I didn't like how they ended the first half.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like how they ended the first half. I wanted to see something in the second half, like, okay, let's show a little killer instinct here and let's just get rid of this team.
You're playing at home. You got a crowd behind you. Let's go put the proverbial nail in the coffin.
And Rutgers, to its credit, after looking like they had no legs in the first half, right, and that's to be expected this time of the year.
Sure.
Came out with incredible jump. They hit a couple shots. Hitting shots always gives you a little more jump. I thought Penn State was careless with the ball, especially too many long passes, which then ended up being LBTs.
Yep.
And problem.
And we have to remember that this Rutgers team really put it to Penn State back in the early season, early going at Rutgers home at the RAC.
You know what's really interesting, though?
Sure.
I'll probably mention this to Pat tonight.
Sure.
Just off the air. This was the exact same game as the game at the RAC last year. Penn State got a big lead at the RAC last year, and Rutgers came back and got within one and couldn't hit the shot at the end.
Couldn't seal the deal.
It was also Ash Wednesday.
I understand.
So I mean, it's like you talk about like okay, we're reliving this. This is interesting.
Yeah, we've been here. It's deja vu all over again.
And
but you're right, Steve. The NCAA committee is not going to nitpick this game one way or another when they're looking at.
They don't even look at it.
No, they'll just look at records, because if you did that, then you have to relive every game down the stretch for 66 teams. Just not going to do that.
You can't do it. Now you're sitting there and you're 21-7. Okay. And you're 11-6 in the Big Ten. You're in second place.
Steve, when was
and not only that, the 11 wins are against 11 different Big Ten teams.
When was the last time Penn State, if ever, had 11 wins in the Big Ten?
1996. They finished 12-6.
All right. So they have a chance. They pass that 1996 team.
Yep, they do.
Was that with the Crispins back in the day?
No.
Who?
No, that was Matt Gaudio, Calvin Booth, Glenn Secunda, Pete Lisicki, and Danny Earle.
Oh, Calvin Booth was my hero. Boy.
He was a redshirt freshman on that team.
Wow. He turned out to be a pretty good player.
He earned, we talk about the money that we've seen Penn State football players make. Calvin Booth earned as much money as any Penn State football player during a 10-year NBA career. He is now an assistant general manager of the Denver Nuggets. There are a lot of people think he's going to be a GM in the league. Last time I talked to Calvin, well, actually I talked to Calvin last year in Chicago. Was the last time I talked to him. And then before that, we were in Minneapolis, and I had a long talk with him. He's just a great guy. I believe Calvin just lost his dad, unfortunately. So
well, yeah, Calvin was something. I mean, I don't think he was a heralded star, as I recall, coming out of high school.
No, he was out of the Columbus area.
Yeah,
out of Ohio,
and he really blossomed at Penn State.
Oh, he sure did. He redshirted. People forget he was a redshirt freshman when he played that year in '96. And every time he turned around, he was blocking a shot on somebody. And he really ended up being a second-round pick. I think the Washington Wizards picked him in the second round.
Yeah.
And he ended up having like a 10-year NBA career. Now he's got a career in the NBA in management.
Well, I remember an interview that you did after a game with Calvin, and I can't remember when or who, but it was one of those post-game interviews, and you could tell right there, highly articulate.
Oh, and now he's a great guy. I just really like him a lot. And like I said, there are a lot of people who feel that he is going to be a general manager in the NBA. He's worked his way through management, and a lot of people have a very high opinion of him.
Well,
but you know what? He'd be proud of this team too. So it's been fun to watch it so far. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. Everybody's wondering how it's going to end. And there's only one way to find out, and that's to keep going.
You got to play them.
Yeah, so you go up next to Iowa. But I feel like the postmortem on this game is almost like the postmortem of the Michigan football game.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Penn State, you play 60 minutes. Okay? All 60 minutes counts. All 40 minutes count. In other words, okay, the last 10 minutes of the game was not the game. There's other stuff that happened in the first 30 minutes that opened the door for Penn State to still have a chance to win at the end. Just like in football, they played 60 minutes. Oh, and Michigan's coming on, and Michigan's coming on. Did Michigan score more points than Penn State? No.
Apparently not at the end.
No. And I mean, it's like guess what? I mean, what was Michigan's final record? 9.5 and 4.5?
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, that was a game where we had 28-7. And they came, 21-7. Then was it 21-21, and we scored right at the end?
It was 21-7.
Right.
Then it was 21-14, 28-14, 28-21, and then Penn State had to get a first down at the end, and KJ Hamler got the first down.
Amazing,
they closed the game
would catch the ball.
Well, no, it was a running play. It was a running play. They ran an inside reverse.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but Hamler caught a few balls early on in that game.
He caught a 53-yard touchdown pass.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, okay, the game's over. Who has more points? I mean, here's Michigan's really coming out. Look how they played. Well, they did what? They didn't win.
Still goes into the loss column, and there's no asterisk after that.
One team ended up in the Cotton Bowl. The other one ended up in the Citrus Bowl. I wonder why.
If you want to have a fun day, you have to drive a Hyundai from Sunbury Motors Hyundai. If an SUV is on your mind, Sunbury Motors Hyundai has the model for you. Save up to $2,835 on a Hyundai Kona, starting at $22,585. Sunbury Motors has 17 2020 Tucsons with savings as high as $4,077. If you're looking for a midsize SUV, test drive a Hyundai Santa Fe with a $4,571 discount. The 2020 Santa Fe starts at $26,552. Sunbury Motors Hyundai has 4 of the all-new Hyundai Palisades, starting at $34,200. All Hyundais come with America's best warranty, a 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. And just announced, every new Hyundai comes with a 3-year regular maintenance plan. If you want to have a fun day in your next SUV, you have to drive a Hyundai. From Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury.
Sunbury Motors.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is The Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
All right, great to have you with us on the show today. Brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury, Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Michigan, by the way, plays Wisconsin tonight. The Combine does continue. There's a certain member in our executive team that's been actually watching the Combine on his computer.
You can't get him off it. That's the trouble. You have a question about something in the broadcasting business, and he's nowhere to be found. I think he's under his desk.
It's unbelievable. It's almost stunning.
Yeah, I mean, those of us who know him know that we're not surprised. He loves that 40-yard dash timing thing. I don't know why.
I do.
Okay.
Live for it.
Yeah.
KJ Hamler, by the way, is not going to run his 40 at the Combine.
Ooh. And what's the reason for that, Steve? Why wouldn't he do it?
Hamstring.
Well, that'll...
The Pro Day here will be March 17th. That's a Tuesday, so Tuesday, March 17th. He is expected to run a 40 at the Pro Day that day.
That's okay. I still want him for the Eagles. I think it'd be a good mid-round selection.
Well, considering they're not playing this weekend, I think he'll be fine for you.
I'm going with the Steelers for KJ.
My understanding is KJ is going to run his 40 at Pro Day here on the 17th. Yeah, and everybody's that option. I mean, a lot of guys. I mean, Chase Young's not going to do his stuff. I mean,
Yeah, quarterback from LSU announced not going to pass at the Combine.
I don't blame him. You know what? When you played longer than everybody else has, doesn't hurt to have a little bit of a break. He can throw at LSU's Pro Day.
And that's what the plan is.
There's a lot of passes on tape that show me how he plays when 11 people consume with Hader trying to get him.
Yes. And we got a Bucknellian at the Combine, the kicker.
Actually, he did. He's not the number 1 rated punter there, but his stats did show up in terms of his measurables and so forth among the top 10 guys between place kickers and punters. So that tells you that a lot of people are serious about him.
Yeah.
That they would put him there. So that's Alex Peachum we're talking about.
Yes, and I think I was talking to a friend of his who played on the Bucknell football team with him. I think he's going down to Villanova for a pro day down there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And he'll
that makes sense.
show off his talents at that point in time. But I think, as I understand it, that combine is kind of a necessary thing for the interview process, the testing that goes on, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, I'm not a big combine person. I'm more of a football person because what they're doing right now is not football. In other words, you know how many guys tell me when they're done good now and go back to practicing football because they're practicing so much of the combine they're not practicing football. But I will say this about the combine. If you're going to if I'm in management now, and I'm going to be investing a lot of money, I mean, the minimum that these guys are going to get will be six figures.
Oh, it's about,
and of course,
600,000 or so.
And the maximum some of these guys are going to get could be eight figures. Mm-hmm. When I'm putting that kind of money in, I do want to know everything about them so I know how, why I'm paying X or why I'm attempting to pay X. This is an important job interview for them. They know how it works out. It's one-stop shopping. You can do certain things at your pro day that can help you without question when they go to your campus and see you. But at the same time, the ability to have one-stop shopping where everybody can get a look at everybody all at once, interview all at once, that I think that's important because management, ownership is pouring a lot of money even into the fifth-round pick. Well, if I'm going to be doing hiring for a company, I'm going to be paying that kind of money. I want to make sure and have as much information as I can because – let's face it, not all these guys are going to pan out. But you want to see if you can do everything you can in your power to give it the best shot.
Well,
I
wonder how Antonio Brown passed the interviews and the psychological profile tests that they administer. I'd love to see the results of that.
Well, but you know what? That was years ago. And you know what? Nobody thought of this about Antonio Brown years ago. It wasn't until the last few years that this happened, Bob. And
I know.
think
it's completely nuts.
Because remember, when he and Wallace were together, they had to make a decision between he and Wallace as to which guy they were going to give the contract to. Well, Brown, to them, was the no-brainer because they felt that Brown was really good, and they also thought he was a solid guy. So he got the 5-year contract. And over time, who knows what happened. I don't know if it was physical or whatever it may be that caused him to go off the end.
Yeah.
But when he got the contract that first time when they had to make the choice between he and Wallace, they picked him.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, there wasn't anybody that quarreled with the decision.
No, that's for certain. But, I don't think behavior like he's exhibited over the last, say, 3 years is something that just overnight happens. It's been there all along, but apparently people were willing to risk huge money, maybe thinking that he'll be fine, we'll keep a leash on him, and didn't work out. But
not only that, guys change too. Sometimes the fame and fortune gets to them as well, and that's why at the Rookie Symposium, Steve, as you know this as well as anybody, that they have those conversations with former players, say, hey, this is how you have to handle the money, this is how you have to handle the fame, because some guys just can't handle that. As soon as Antonio Brown got the big contract, that's when things kind of went south a little bit.
I mean, you get a couple of state awards and you're gone.
Exactly. Or a high bowling score.
But in the case of Antonio Brown, though, I do think we're seeing our first. I'm not a doctor. I could be way off with this, but just my hunch is this is your first real live case of seeing how bad CTE can be on certain players. Because of what you've seen from Antonio Brown, because of this the crazy night and day comparisons you've seen from him. That to me is something that's medically alarming than anything else. But it could be just simply he just let everything go to his head too. We don't know that.
Or I mean, could it be? I mean, as simple as like just say in everyday life, somebody being bipolar.
Yeah.
I mean, again,
yeah.
but I don't want to get into the Antonio Brown thing. I don't want. I'm not going to get into the Antonio Brown thing. Okay.
No, okay.
I mean,
but
the reason
I think the larger picture is that's why you go to the combine. You go through the process there. You can show off your physical talents at any point in time.
Right. It's the interview process that's really important. Yeah. And I know you brought up how did he interview? Well, I mean, that he wasn't thought of being an issue back then. That's why he probably interviewed just fine.
Yeah.
So, all right. Dick in Milton has a couple of questions. Hi, Dick. How are you today? Great to have you with us. Hope you're well.
Oh, yeah. You know, when I was actually listening to you talking to Bob about the games, and you went to the Illinois game, I wanted to call you about. I actually went to that game. And I have a little different perspective about that second half where you said they played good defense, which they did. But the other thing they did is when they were behind, they were letting Illinois run that shot clock down. They don't have the ball, so you can't score. And then they did have four shot clock violations. But how many times did they let them run in and make a layup with like 1 second left or 2 seconds left? I guess my only point is they probably took a lot of game time off there just letting them run that around the perimeter. That was my perspective of that. There was as good as the ball pressure was, Illinois could just dribble it down for 28, 29 seconds. And then they made a lot of baskets, easy baskets, too.
That's the point we made on the broadcast over and over again. They were trying to shorten the game.
You mean on the actual game broadcast.
Yeah, the actual game broadcast. We talked about it repeatedly because even the shot clock violations took 2 minutes off the clock.
Well, that was my whole point when I watched that. I'm thinking, why are they letting them run this? And every time they let them do that, they were losing valuable time that they didn't have the basketball. That was my only point about that, and I went away kind of frustrated by that.
Well, and who got the ball? Who got the ball? The NBA guy. I mean, Jasum was going to be in the NBA. So he's the one guy that they could go to who could break you down off the dribble and get himself a shot. And you notice when they lost to Rutgers, he didn't play. Well, Penn State's been going through this without Myeron Jones for 6 games.
Right, okay. and I just, well, I was going to call you about that, and then you brought it up. I didn't. You brought it up when you're talking to Bob, and you said about how good the defense was, and as well as they played defense. To me, it was also a kind of a catch-22 on their part. Actually,
that wasn't really my point. Let me explain what my point was. My point is that you craft comebacks in part in your ability to get live ball turnovers. And what happened in the Illinois game is you got 4 shot clock violations, which are great defense, but they're also dead ball turnovers, which then allows the opposing team to set their defense up. So that's the only plus that it's – I mean, you're actually better off sometimes when there's like 3 or 4 in the shot clock and you're in the corner, and instead of trying to force a pass to somebody or fire up something, you're almost better taking the ball and just dropping it out of bounds and walking down court because you can set your defense up. I mean, that was the point I was trying to make.
Though. I just thought, I said they're just killing themselves by not forcing them to actually do something. That was my only point.
Well, I mean, it's hard to force them to do something when their ball movement was good, or when he's out there with the ball, and you don't really want to foul him because now there's 8 in the shot clock. And to his credit, on a night where they score 58, they scored 58. He had 24 to 58. One guy. And that's who he is. I mean, he's a guy who had put his name in for the NBA draft, looked like he was going to be around 35, 36, so he decided to come back for an extra year. A lot of people think he's a 20 to 30 pick in the NBA draft this year, and he played like it. He just, to his credit, you know what? He had some good shots, some tough shots, and they had a great game plan. They won the game, and it helps when your 41% three-point shooter on the other team isn't playing the game. And he also is a guy that's second on your team in steals, not playing the game. He's also one of your facilitators not playing the game. See, Penn State's had to go through a 6-game stretch without 14 points per game. Illinois went one game without their guy and lost. Penn State went 4-2 with one of their key guys.
Yeah, I understand that, and I feel bad that they don't have Myeron Jones. I understand he would be a catalyst out there on the court because he does a lot of different things. but they've done well, like, for by and large. It just happened to be a game that I happened to be at, and I went away kind of frustrated. I guess that's my point.
I drove home frustrated too, Dick.
Thanks, Steve. Anyhow, thanks a lot.
I did. Thanks, Dick.
Yeah, Dick picked the wrong game to go to.
Nah, he picked a good game to go to.
He should have been there last night.
That's, you know what. That was Dick's absolutely right but what Illinois did was it was a great game plan. The game plan only pays off if you've got a guy like DeSumo who can hit some shots for you.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of pressure on a guy to do that, where he's consistently got to be the guy at the end of the shot clock to make plays, and he's making one play after another. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
It was like 6 days earlier. They had to help him off the court. Right now he's out there running around like, hey, he looks healthy to me.
I think, Steve, on the pregame not on the pregame show, on the show where you talked to the Illinois play-by-play guy, you refrained from asking him the question as a matter of professional courtesy.
I did. I knew he was playing.
He going to play tonight? And you didn't put him in that position to deny it or admit it.
I didn't, because Brian wouldn't say anything.
Exactly.
So it's not worth embarrassing. But I knew he was playing.
And the bottom line is, I think it shows the importance of playing smart with a lead.
Yeah, and they did. Look, and Penn State didn't play well that night.
Yeah,
it's okay. Mark Turgeon made a comment last night after the game about travel. We'll get to that in a moment on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Sean Morris of BTN and I have a running joke, and Dick Girardi's in on the joke as well. All right. We're in Nebraska. Sean always says to us, remember, it's about the kids. And so we're in Nebraska, the game's about to start, and the BTN guys were just to our left. And all of a sudden, this note gets passed over to us, and the note says, remember, it's all about the kids. So last night, Mark Turgeon, his team dramatically rallies and wins and beats Minnesota. Daryl Morcell had a three-pointer with 1.9 seconds to go. So after the game, Mark Turgeon's talking with Olivia Decker of BTN, and he closes out the interview with this. Let's see if we can get. Here we go.
My goal is to be in my driveway before 4:30. We played a 9 o'clock Eastern game in Minnesota on a weeknight. Makes no sense.
Well, guess what? He's not wrong. Okay? He is not wrong. Okay? Why are you playing? Now, I know it's a Wednesday night, so that helps. But you're playing a 9 o'clock game on a Wednesday. You got to come back and you got to play Saturday. Well, guess what? Hey, you want to be back at his driveway by 4:30 this morning? He wasn't back at his driveway at 4:30 this morning. They had plane trouble. They didn't leave till this afternoon.
Oh, boy.
What? Ouch.
This has happened. Look, I understand college football and college basketball are all over the place when it comes to start times, travel times. College basketball, of course, because of the number of games. But you've got to do this to pay for everything else. You know, it's like there was a comment made that said, well, you know, maybe Maryland ought to give back the check. Excuse me, but that check really isn't for Maryland basketball. Okay, that check is probably helping out how many other sports at Maryland along the way.
It all goes into the big kitty. That's where it goes.
And you know, because Maryland basketball is in terms of profit margin, is profitable. Right? Everything else around it is not. And you know, you're playing a 9 o'clock game in the middle of the week, and then you're expecting your kids to get back at. Okay, so he wants to be in his driveway at 4:30. Who knows how far it is from the airport to his house? Who knows? So let's just say Maryland gets back on campus at 3:30. Right? You know, those guys are expected to be, if they have an 8 or 9 o'clock class, are expected to be there. Right? You're expected to be there, and that's part of the deal of having a scholarship. But this is something, look, as somebody who has lived it over and over again, it doesn't affect me because I'm a professional. Right? My job's to do the game. My job's to show up at work the next day and the whole deal. but I can understand where he's coming from, where you've exerted yourself. All these television starts with all the different days of the week. I remember back a long time ago, you were playing Wednesdays and Saturdays all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, it was a big deal to play a Tuesday night. Okay? It was a one-off. Well, now you've got games all over the lot. There was a year, and I want to say it was 2 years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, when Penn State played a season and played on all 7 days of the week. They had Monday games, they had Friday games, they had Saturday games, Sunday games, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You're like, holy man, every time you turned around. And see, it's hard to balance out when you've got such quick turnarounds all the time. And, for example, Rutgers, that was their 16th consecutive game with no break. They've had no break. They're finally going to get a break this weekend. They finally get their break. So they're going to be interesting to see how they play Tuesday night when they host Maryland, because I think for the first time they're going to have some legs in about a week and a half. Conversely, Penn State's the only team, and again, no complaint, because as you know, I praised this schedule and said this schedule's fine, and it is. But it just turns out it's Penn State's turn right now. Penn State's the only team in the Big Ten playing 9 games in the month of February. And that's a lot of games in any month. 9 games would be a lot of games in January with 2 extra days, let alone 9 and 29.
In Rutgers' case, Steve, didn't they have like an extensive home schedule though this year? Even though there were a lot of them in between.
Yeah, but you can schedule your non-conference any way you want. But the thing for them is you keep going and going and going and going.
Right.
The longest stretch, Penn State 1 year. This is many years ago. You get 2 breaks in the schedule. One's in the middle of the week and one's a weekend. Okay? It turned out 1 year, Penn State's midweek break was the first week of the season, and their end break was the last week of the season. They played 18 consecutive games in the middle.
That'll take the starch out of you.
Well, and then you get, that's how the computer did it. No, excuse me. Okay, I said to the guy at the Big Ten, I said, so you're telling me that a robot put the information in, or did a human enter it? He says, a human does. I said, enough said. We're done.
Yeah, nothing else to say after that.
I mean, seriously,
garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, you can look at it and go, hey, look, that's not right.